We want to welcome everyone watching on Facebook Live to a conversation here at Mayo Civic Center in Rochester, Minnesota. My name is Tom Weber. We're in day 2 of a conference here called Transform. If you're watching online, we hope you can join us here in person next year for Transform. This conversation is that we're about to have is about a big new partnership recently announced. For those of us in the room, we all met Chris Ross yesterday morning when he told us his story of being a higher up here at Mayo, but then being a patient also when he had cancer. Chris is back now to talk about the work he does in his day job, and he's joined by Aashima Gupta from Google. Mayo Clinic and Google recently announced a partnership that we're going to unpack a little now. Please submit your audience questions if you're here in the room. pollev.com/TXFM. Please welcome Chris Ross and Aashima Gupta. How are you?
Thank you.
Thanks so much for being here. Hi, Chris. Good to see you. Have a seat. And Chris, I'm going to start with you as you get seated there, just to give us the overview. Just what are we talking about here with Mayo and Google?
Thanks, Tom. We are really excited to be working with Google. We've been chasing Aashima and I and colleagues, chasing each other to get to this deal for quite a long time. It really has 2 parts, one of which is Mayo wants to put its data, private patient data that we manage in our data centers today, we want to move it to the cloud for power, compute, capability. That's our data for our purposes, managing our patients. When I say our data, I literally mean the data of our patients that we manage in trust for them. The second part of it is, how do we get appropriately de-identified data to be used for research in a variety of areas, and we'll talk about those in a minute. We've got lots of great examples. But our vision is to put these great physician scientists from Mayo shoulder to shoulder with AI and machine learning engineers from Google, many of whom are physicians themselves, to create great breakthroughs in care and cures.
Is there anything you wanted to add about that?
I would say it's truly an honor and a privilege for Google Cloud, and I'm speaking on behalf of all the engineers who will be working with Mayo Clinic. There's an amazing sense of enthusiasm and excitement. We see Mayo as a leader in the world for solving rare and complex diseases. These are hard problems. Googlers love to solve hard problems. So that's where the 2 powerful, amazing brands are coming together to drive a transformative impact in the healthcare. So we're very excited.
So on a kind of technical issue, I believe the medical records of patients here at Mayo are on Epic, or an electronic record like Epic. Do I have that right?
Yeah, we use a lot of clinical systems. Epic is the main one. There's other ones.
Okay. So what happened? Like, Epic is its own company. It has its own databases, et cetera, et cetera. How does that happen that you can then grab it and put it in the cloud?
It's a great question, Tom. So I try to describe our technology, especially as it emerges, as being 2 hemispheres. And if you think of one hemisphere on the left is the stuff that's used to manage patient care on a day-to-day basis. So that would be our Epic system, but it would also be all of our radiology systems, all of our lab systems, all the financial systems. And on the right-hand side is the cloud-based piece, which is how do we take data out of those necessarily messy transactional systems and make it available for innovators. So when a scientist is trying to study some disease state, they don't want to go to the core transactional data, which is not very usable. So there's this process of data extraction and enrichment that tees up that data so the scientists can get to work.
And to add to that, not all of our patient data lives in EHR, right? Your data is what you're eating, what your nutrition is, what your lifestyle is, what is your genomics history, where are your x-rays, MRIs. All that are different silos, if you will, which is a typical healthcare IT landscape. So we want to build and consolidate that, like combine the data from EHR with imaging, with genomics, with even publicly available data sets, like if I'm asthmatic, knowing the weather pattern. So getting all those different data sets, and by combining all these data points from a patient and creating the right intervention at the right time, we believe will yield to better outcomes. So, and that's what we want to enable. This vision that Chris laid out is to build that, or enable Mayo to build that healthcare platform.
How can you guarantee that everything about me will be kept private?
So that's a great question. This Google Cloud project will be for Mayo, and we take privacy very seriously and security in Google. So think, and this is Chris's analogy I'll use, it's a lockbox and it's a bank vault. They have the key. All the data is encrypted, and it can only be decrypted by Mayo's technologists and technicians. And that's the environment we are enabling for Mayo. Chris, you want to add to that?
I think you described it well, but I would say from our perspective, we want to keep it safe from being stolen. And we know that the data will be safer in the Google Cloud than it can be in our own data centers, just because our data centers are exposed to a lot of openness that we need to manage patient data, right? To manage patient care. So we're sure that that data will be more secure. And then the question is, how do we keep it private? And again, only we hold the keys to the data. It's encrypted in the Google environment. We have the ability to see how Google engineers are interacting with the data just to do maintenance stuff. We have the ability to know everything that's happening with the de-identified patient data and the identifiable data that sits in the cloud. And then there's a specific set of institutional processes that Mayo has been managing for a number of years that we use to share data for legitimate research purposes. You know, de-identified data has been used for decades to help advance care. And that's just accelerating as we're seeing the power of data-driven discovery becoming more and more mainstream, being the predominant form of medical research nowadays.
You know, you mentioned something actually that I don't know that I know because I don't have the IT knowledge and know-how, but to say that it's actually safer on the cloud than where it lives now in the data centers, that's intriguing to me, but it also seems like it's safer in the cloud until it's not, if something happens. Is that fair to say that?
Once someone breaks in, it's gone no matter what, right? It doesn't really matter. So our job and Google's job every day is to keep data safe. And Mayo pours substantial resources. Believe me, our CFO asks me about it all the time. Mm-hmm. We spend substantial amount of resources to keep our data safe, and it is safe. But the thing that you want to avoid is the catastrophic break-in when someone is able to take out large amounts of data. And you know, we're becoming more and more secure. The whole industry is becoming more and more secure. Healthcare wasn't in very good shape a couple of years ago, but we're getting there.
So I'll add to that. Very recently, Forrester named Google Cloud as a leader in security. And it's not just Aashima saying that. We have third-party audits. For example, we have ISO certifications, SOC 1, 2, 3 audits. So if there are third-party verification, we take security very seriously. And our security protocol is security defense at depth. That means each layer, there's a security control in place. And also, as I mentioned, everything, the data is encrypted by default. And from Google Cloud's perspective, data vulnerability, this question we are posed a lot. And to be successful in healthcare, it's a non-starter to not give that reassurance to our customers. So we do not have access to from the privacy perspective. We comply to HIPAA compliance. We comply to all third-party audits. And so in summary, we know we are custodian for this data for Mayo, and it's a responsibility which is we take very seriously, not just at the R level, even from our CEO's level. It's a top priority for us.
For people, for the average person, their interaction with Google is a business that mines my data, that sees my browsing history, that knows what I like, that sees what I watch on YouTube, because you own YouTube, and uses that in a business way to make money. Mm-hmm. And so to hear that then my medical information will be in the same company, under the same roof, as a company that in other places makes personalized ads for me, that may be jarring to people to hear. What would you say to those people?
So Google as a consumer company, an average consumer, because our interactions are absolutely right, and we are proud to be that consumer company to create tools like Gmail, YouTube that are used by billions of people globally. Google Cloud is a different arm of Google, which is very enterprise-centric. So we package the same infrastructure that serves our products and now making it available for the enterprise so that we can leverage the infrastructure democratization of the innovation that we have done in our infrastructure so that the same engineer, whether it's Google engineer or a Mayo engineer sitting in Rochester, they have the same security and controls, but it's a completely different side of the business. It's not the business which is and that's the big Google search ads, different side. Google Cloud, enterprise, our bread and butter, we won't exist if we can, if we are combining the data. So it's very different infrastructure. We don't have access to it. It's for the service of a customer.
So, Tom, I agree with everything that Aashima just said. Our view of it was very much a trust but verify approach. When we started our conversation with Google Cloud, they were in a different place. And I'm talking about 4 years ago, in which the level of maturity in terms of that segregation didn't exist. And so we didn't move a lot of our data to the cloud for that very reason. We understand their business model, it's well articulated, and we have the ability to verify that Google is keeping its promises.
In the way, if this plays out the way you envision, Chris, give me a scenario of a patient getting care and how that patient's care will be better in the future because of this partnership.
So we brought a slide.
We did.
Can we show a slide?
Yeah, all right. I didn't know we had a slide.
We did. Let's see if it shows up. So, this is a description this is a Mayo slide, but it's a shared vision that we've been working on with Google a lot. If you compare the left hand and the right hand side, this relates to our emerging strategy at Mayo. But you can see a lot of the adjectives that describe the way care is delivered today, and we know the ways in which it's profoundly broken. The stuff on the right is what we are really aspiring to get to. So how can we be more preemptive than reactive? How can we be more uncomplicated rather than complicated? How can we meet patients where they want to be? So yesterday we had a kickoff meeting. We had scientists from Google and Mayo sharing for an inside audience the kinds of things we want to do. And it's mind-blowing to be looking at the things that Google now has tools that are being used in India and Thailand for diabetic retinopathy that allows a machine to diagnose the presence of a disease that causes blindness. We heard from our radiologists who are now detecting the genomic content of tumors from a radiology image as opposed to a biopsy kind of approach. The things that we can do in almost every place where you can digitize part of a patient's physical condition, whether that's a radiological image, an image of the skin, a pathological sample, waveforms that come from the heart or from the brain. There's an enormous amount of data that human beings put off that can be analyzed to help improve health. And the breakthroughs are really remarkable.
So just to clarify, the fact that if I go into a clinic and some tests are done, and then at the end of that, I am diagnosed that you have diabetes. That's the result of that visit. Is the fact that I have diabetes going to end up on the cloud, or are the tests that were run, for example, without my name attached, is that what's going to get on the cloud?
So Tom Weber's record will remain under Mayo's control.
And
no matter what.
That won't go to Google.
There's some places where we'll store that just for backup purposes and other kinds of things, but the main piece, like your lab record, will stay in our lab system, and your interaction, the documentation of your interaction with your physician would stay in our Epic system, and so on. And then we'll have replicas of that data that we'll use for some other purposes, only for your purposes. But the de-identified data, so for example, we're going to draw blood samples from a number of patients, and we may want to look at some attribute of, I don't know, of blood chemistry in some fashion. Or maybe we did an image of your eye to see if you have glaucoma associated with diabetes. We'd want to use those images for research purposes. And again, we and other academic institutions have been using that material for research purposes for decades. This just gives us the opportunity to do it at 10x, 100x more power and speed.
So that you may be able to figure out in 5 years that, good-looking 40-year-olds who wear blue glasses are more prone to diabetes. Not because you know Tom Weber has diabetes, but because you knew date of birth or general age, ethnicity, and that was kind of run through the cloud machine, the stuff to try to do that?
Yeah, so you're talking about this risk of, and I know Aashima will add to this too, the risk of re-identification, right? The ability to take data and figure out exactly what you just said. It's less likely that someone would be able to take that single record and be able to back into, well, that's Tom Weber. Mm-hmm. It's more likely that happens when two different data sets are joined with each other that provide some insight. One piece of the puzzle connects to another. And the science of de-identification, to stay ahead of re-identification, is something we're really committed to. There was just a paper published by a couple of Mayo physicians, I'm sorry, I forget which publication, that just came out this week, that addressed that very issue. So we're going to continue to look at that. One of our goals is as much as possible to try and keep the data within Mayo's control, even the de-identified data, so as not to ship the data to someone else to do analysis, but to have the analysis occur behind glass in our environment where the data doesn't leave at all. And that behind glass would all be in the Google Cloud. There's lots of ways that you can get advertent and inadvertent re-identification. We're getting into pretty geeky stuff, and we'll go as geek as you want, but it's a thing we need to keep.
But in general, the cloud, what's in the cloud is for research,
Yep.
right? To look for big picture stuff.
Correct.
So as an example, we talk about in healthcare, patient engagement, population health. Now I'll break it down to you. So let's say if Mayo Clinic is interested in doing this sample query, what are the females aged 45 to 50 who have BRCA gene 1 and 2, haven't had their mammogram in 2 years, and have a family history of breast cancer, and they want to make an outreach to that patient population. Now that means to run that query today in healthcare is super hard, because my patient history lives in one area, like EHR. My mammograms are in a completely different PAC system. My genomics information is indifferent, and whether my insurance pays for it or not is a fourth system. So now, how do you combine all that? And it's not, by the way, an AI. It's how do you combine the different silos to not give this broken experience, be it making very meaningful population health engagement, to say, please come to the clinic, your insurance pays for it, get a mammogram. So that is a level of analytics that you can do with a powerful engine, which is cloud.
Tom, maybe let me try and provide a patient journey. I'll use the example of my own healthcare, right? I talked about my cancer yesterday. So I happen to have colon cancer. So here's how we'd want to use this power, right? I show up to get my colonoscopy. There's a question of what sedation level should I have. Okay, well, we want to put a whole bunch of patient data in the cloud that we can run in real time so that an algorithm could say, here's the level of sedation I should get from my colonoscopy. Then the procedure proceeds. We're working on machine methods to read the colonoscopy in really real time so the machine can see polyps that the gastroenterologist might not see. So I'm going to have better fidelity about whether my test is done. Then I'm going to want to have a snippet taken and send to pathology. I want to have a digital pathology method look at my tumor to determine what type it might be if there's a tumor, or maybe it's benign. And then I want to look at the genomic data to type it to see what the therapy should be, right? Then we can go to my, a post-surgery kind of event, or we can start in radiation oncology. I had to have 25 doses of radiation delivered as part of my therapy. One of the things we want to do is to put the right amount of radiation in my body, but not have it hit adjacent organ systems that's going to damage it. So Google, DeepMind, and Mayo Clinic are in parallel working in an approach that's called to segment and profile and contour that organ, so we can deliver the right amount of radiation to the tumor but not damage something else. Well, as a patient, I want all those things, right? I want my colonoscopy to go well. I want them to see everything they ought to see and not miss something. I want it to get typed accurately and quickly. I'd sure like to know the genomic typing. When it's time for me to have radiation therapy, God forbid, I want the radiation to be delivered in the right kind of way. And I can follow that all the way out into post-care.
But what you don't want is if you have chemotherapy and it causes you to lose your hair, you don't.
Dude.
I understand, but go with it for a second. If you have chemotherapy and you have a chemotherapy appointment and it's causing you to lose your hair, if this data is in the Google Cloud, I don't want to go home and open my browser and see advertisements for wigs.
Get it. I totally get it.
Absolutely.
And that,
You can guarantee that will not happen?
Yes.
that will not happen.
Absolutely. It's a completely different data and different location. We are not combining the search. As I mentioned, that's the consumer side of the business. This is an enterprise, which is to enable the use case that Chris so eloquently described.
Google Cloud, as this separate entity, is also a for-profit part of the business.
Yes.
So other than the money you're getting from whatever the agreement is, I don't know what the details are, but other than the money you're getting from Mayo, what does Google get out of this?
So that's our business model for Google Cloud. We want to enable, there's a whole platform that we're providing, and that's our bread and butter. We want to enable this infrastructure provisioning and earn money with that. That's
the thing.
That's our business. Our business is not selling ads. So again, think of it like from Google's diversification. Yes, we make money in ads. We want to now do it for profit as a business to really build a robust, secure, compliant infrastructure to enable companies in all different verticals. So Google Cloud serves not just healthcare, fintech, retail, and we are working with industry to enable their infrastructure modernization. We believe we have at the heart of it tools like AI and machine learning, when they get applied in the industry, can have a transformative impact. That's why it's fascinating. It's not just about the money. Definitely, that is a part. But at the heart of it, as Chris mentioned, we were having Google engineers, scientists, physicians all coming together. We believe that we can have this technology can be applied in a meaningful way to drive the impact that Chris was talking about at the end to help patients.
Will the patient, here's a question from the audience, have a choice of not having their data transmitted to the cloud?
No. Operationally, it would simply be impossible for us to manage that, especially retroactively. So we have a highly disciplined process by which we do consent management, and we'll continue that.
Can you give us a few concrete examples of what mechanisms assure the security that you're talking about? I think on the Gmail side of things, we do two-factor authentication where you get the code on your phone. I presume there are comparable type things on your side. What's an example?
So first of all, all the ID and passwords and encryption and all that lies with Mayo. Google engineers will not have access to it. We have security, and there's a method in security defense in depth, that each one, we have robust audit logs, who has access to data, and those audit logs will be available to Mayo Clinic. And in addition to that, we have third-party audits, as I said, when you say controls. Yes, we have controls, and we have third-party audits who have done audits to really look into what our procedures, protocols are. And I mentioned those are ISO 27001, 27018, SOC 123 audit. And in addition, we are giving that toolkit to really have Mayo's technical staff really look into the audit log, see who's accessing the data at what time. And
so will Google, when we get to the point where we now have something we can research, we want to look for trends, we want to research something, is that only done, Chris, by people at Mayo when they've taken stuff back off the cloud? Or actually, does Google also have researchers to actually do the medical research as we think of it?
They have researchers to do medical work. We met some physicians yesterday who are just fantastic, and we've known some of them for years. But Google does not have the ability to initiate or run research in any fashion on any of our data. It'll only exist where we take it out of our environment, de-identify it, put it in a container where we manage it jointly.
So you Google an item like this and you come up with news stories. So for example, I have no idea if what I'm about to talk about is at all related to anything here, but in 2017, Google went into a data mining partnership with the University of Chicago Medical Center. And then a patient this year sued Google and UCMC, alleging that these medical records were given to Google without having been stripped of the time and date stamps. I don't need you to comment on that one case, but is there something to glean from that? Is there something to learn from that? Or is that at all applicable as a worry to what's happening here?
It's an absolute, I think this did come up, and the case is under litigation, so I won't be able to provide comment.
No, I understand.
I will leave with you. We are fighting it very rigorously. We take HIPAA privacy and security very seriously, and we don't believe. So again, it'll be inappropriate for me to do the comment because of the case, but we are fighting it.
So we looked at all those really carefully when that lawsuit was alleged. We looked at all the facts as we could understand them. We contacted some of the parties to the extent we could to learn from it as much as we can. It did not change our decision. We didn't think it was material from our judgment of what actually are the facts. Clearly, it's pending litigation. I don't want to say any more than that. But there are, as I said before, a number of places in which this re-identification and insufficient de-identification risk is really important. We take it very seriously. We hire third-party experts to certify that our data has been de-identified. Only use it under those kind of circumstances. And again, we're going to try and take some extra precautions, like the idea of having the analytics come to our data as opposed to our data going someplace else.
I'm not trying to be persnickety with this question, but was this done, Chris? Was this what we're talking about done for the sake of Mayo or for the sake of patients?
Mayo is a not-for-profit institution that has the needs of the patient come first as its goal. And I've worked in other organizations, and I can say as wholeheartedly as I possibly can that that principle is one that infuses this place. People truly act on it. So I do not have any moral or professional concerns that we aren't keeping the patient interests first and foremost.
Do you think if this had been in place when you got your cancer diagnosis, that your treatment in any way would have been different? I don't know that necessarily the treatment would have been different, but like, do you think your experience would have been noticeably different as a patient because this might have been already up and running?
Absolutely. I mean, I tried to give a couple of examples of it. My care here happened to be absolutely exemplary. There weren't any places where my care fell apart where I wish that it was in place, but I do know that my experience would have been better even if the clinical values would have stayed the same. You know, we're working on things like aftercare regime, and that's the place where I am in my particular health journey. I'm trying to manage this disease, make sure it doesn't return. And we're looking at all kinds of ways to apply these same kind of technologies to patient engagement, patient awareness, those kinds of things.
What's the most exciting projects you guys are thinking about or already starting? What do you want to get your hands dirty on here with this?
So there are like three broad areas. The number one, as we talked about, enabling Mayo's healthcare data platform, ability to connect public data sets, different modalities of the data. The second is, the most exciting part to me is the co-development of AI and machine learning algorithms along with Mayo, bringing Google's expertise with the world-leading global experts in serious and complex diseases. So we are, as part of this agreement, that is definitely a part of the initiative that we will be embarking on. How do we bring the AI machine learning talent alongside Mayo's expertise in solving really AI, building models for rare and complex diseases? We haven't picked a disease yet, but that's the second part. And of course, the third is, it's a holistic transformation strategy. Can we better the digital experience for consumer, as Chris talked about?
Do you have an answer?
Early detection is really interesting. There's a number of things we can do to detect the presence of disease before it occurs. Things like heart disease, the detection of atrial fibrillation before a patient knows that they have that disease. The ability to detect when someone's in an inpatient setting that they might be at risk for sepsis or something like that.
The ability to know someone has heart disease before what is currently the time when doctors find heart disease.
Yes.
Is what you're talking
about. Yeah. And how can we avoid disease as a way of promoting wellness?
Chris Ross and Aashima Gupta, thank you very much. This conference, especially for those watching online, this is a conference called Transform, because the goal is to find ways that people are already transforming health and healthcare and how they could and should in the future. So if you've been watching online, please consider joining us next year. The website is transformconference.mayo.edu. Thank you for joining us online, and thank you to Chris and Aashima for discussing this partnership.
Thanks, Tom.
So much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tom.